everyone, welcome to Knitting Noodles, and in today's video I think that we are finally going to cover how to knit in the round. Now, you do not necessarily need to knit in the round. A lot of projects are easier if you do knit in the round. However, everything can be adapted to be knit flat. The benefit of knitting in the round is that there's no seam at the end for you to sew up. It's just circular, nice tube. Socks are usually knit in the round. Hats are a lot easier to make knit in the round, which I will show you a hat that I recently made. This is a little newborn baby hat that I made out of wool using double point needles, which double point needles are one of the methods to knit in the round. There are two different needle types. There are circular needles. All right. These are circular knitting needles. Now there are many different types. This can come wood, metal, and there also is a variation where these unscrew. So that's actually really helpful because there are different lengths of this connector. Sometimes they're plastic like this one. Sometimes heavier duty like black plastic. I don't know if I've seen anything other than that. But either clear or black plastic. Let me know if there's other types of connectors. But there are different lengths. Like this is a 16 inch. There is like a 24 inch. Let me show you a longer. There's this one. It's about like 24-ish, I believe. I don't remember. I'll have to measure it again. But circular needles, you want to match the length to the project that you're working, because if you're working a baby hat and you pick up 24-inch circular needle, that is going to be way too big and you're not going to be able to get your stitches around unless you use a specific type of method, which we're not going to worry about here. We'll cover that in another video. So for circular needles, you do want to match the length of this to the project you're working with, which is why the detachable ones are super duper handy, because there's certain types where you can see on these, they have little screws at the bottom. So you just buy the connector piece and you'd screw it on. That way you don't have to pay. These normally are like $12. I got it on clearance. But $12 for each circular needle, which is not worth it. I think it's between 6 and 12. Not worth it. A lot cheaper to get little different length connector pieces. That way you don't need like a million different needles as well. I just wanted to say like, comment, subscribe. So yeah. Like, comment, subscribe. Love you. Bye. So yeah, that is circular needles. This is totally up to personal preference. Some people love circular needles. They only use circular needles. You can even use circular needles as straight needles. Just work it back and forth. Baby blankets are often used, blankets in general are usually worked on circular needles because it's a longer length, which makes it easier to work blankets. The other type of needle to work in the round is double point needles. Now, some people prefer one over the other. Personally, I really like double point needles more. Not really sure why. Maybe it's just the comfort of having straight needles, and also it doesn't really matter as much the length of the loop for the circular needles, because you kind of just assemble these into a little either triangle with 3, one of my needles went flying, triangle with 3 or a square with 4, and you just adapt as you go. I think that double points are a little bit more flexible for working in the round, but that's just me. There are different methods where you can make circular needles more adaptable, but personally I just like double points. So I will show you how to knit in the round using both of these. So let's get down onto my new fancy desk and I will show you how to knit in the round. Let's go! Alright, the first method I'm going to show you is how to knit in the round with double point needles. Because personally, I feel like it's easier, so I'm going to cover this one first. So the first thing you want to do is determine in your pattern how many stitches you need to cast on. So let's say, for the sake of this, we want to do a higher amount. So let's do like 25 stitches. Oftentimes in patterns, it'll also tell you how many stitches to have on each needle. So I will show you how you divide that up. So my preferred way to do this is to just do a regular cast on for the first, however many stitches. So let's do 25 stitches. Let me do one that we've covered, that way it's easier. I'm so used to doing the German long tail method. Let's do the knit on cast on. Because I feel like for knitting in the round, doing the single cast on tends to get a little stretched out and look a little messy in the round. So let's just cast on those 25 stitches, and it's all just going to go on this one needle. If you need to review how to cast on, up over here. Alright, I'll fast forward to when we have 25 stitches and I will show you what to do next. Okay, here we have 25 stitches. The next thing to do is to divide this among your needles. Now, oftentimes it'll say you just need a pack of 4, a pack of 5, and then you divide it. If it says to get a pack of 5 needles, you divide it among 4 needles, these stitches, and then the 5th needle you use to knit around. If it says you only need a pack of 4 needles, that means you only need 3. Again, this is very variable. It does not matter that much. So for this, because 25 is a smaller number, I'm only going to use 3 needles to divide it amongst, because that's going to be easier than having just a few stitches on 4 needles. It's going to be easier for it to slide off, so I find it easier to work with less needles. So all you're going to do is, you could go from the front or from the back, just transfer them over. There's 25, so we'll do 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One more. And then this should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So the other two will have 9. So then you take it from the back and you transfer 9 stitches onto the last needle. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you want to be very careful not to twist this. So you can see with the bumps, that's how you know that it's not twisted. If it was twisted, it would look something more like this. You can see the twist right there. So you have to be very careful to not get this twisted, otherwise your work will look a little wonky, a little weird. So the next step is to join this into the round. So the working yarn is on this first needle. You also want to place a marker to remember where the beginning is. So first we're going to start knitting. We're just going to knit. We're going to put our needle into that last stitch. We're going to take the working yarn, this one, and we're going to knit that stitch, and that is going to bring us into a round. So make sure that it stays a little bit snug, especially that first stitch, because you don't want a gap between the rounds. It looks a little weird. So let's finish this needle. All right, there we go. First needle done. This one comes out. This is the beginning of the round. Now, there are many different things you could do for marking the beginning of the round. If you have uneven stitches, technically you don't even need one, you can count. But sometimes you have the same amount of stitches on all needles, and for that you are going to need a stitch marker. So there are round ones. I only have the clip ones. The round ones you just slip on the end. What you would have to do to make sure it stays on the needle is to take one of the stitches from here, slip it behind. That way you know the marker stays in place and you know where the round starts. Or what I like to do with these clip-on ones, if you don't have a clip-on one, you could just use a safety pin or paper clip. You just go through that first stitch, clip it in place, and that marks right there, which means this needle is the beginning of the round. Then you just continue working around, and instead of a row, you'll see this referred to as a round because you're working in a circle. So to complete a round, you have to go all the way around back to that first stitch when you joined it. And that's the end of the first round. You can kind of see that connector piece. As you keep working, it's gonna join it tighter together so you won't be able to tell. But right now, that's why you want to pull it as tight as possible. So otherwise this will be really loose. So you just keep working like that and it'll go in a circle, work all the way up. Now when you work in the round, when you're doing garter stitch, which is just knitting, you knit the front and you knit the back. For knitting in the round, the back automatically assumes that it's purl. Alright, this is what it looks like after a few rounds. You can see how that kind of closed itself up. It's not really dangling open anymore. You will notice there is this loose part here. That just kind of comes with the type of cast on that we did. Once you weave the end in, it'll kind of disappear and you can tighten it up a bit. But that's basically the technique for double point needles. Super simple, just knit along each one. I think double point needles is a great first stepping stone for working in the round for beginner knitters because it still has the familiarity of working with straight needles. You just, instead of one pointy side, you have two of them. So the other technique is working in the round using circular needles, and I'll go over how to work with those. Alright, for circular needles, you're going to need to cast on the number of stitches needed to cover the length of it. There are some techniques, such as the magic loop, where you can work smaller on a circular needle, but if you're just beginning, it's best to just think about matching the amount of stitches to how big the needle is. Whatever pattern you're using will say what size needle, which is this part, and the length of the connector piece. So these are size 3 needles with a 16-inch length. So if the pattern is making something bigger, you could say 24. There are some smaller sizes that people will frequently use for sock knitting because some people prefer using circular needles. I haven't seen them at very many craft stores though. I'd say 16, 24, and I believe 36 are the usual sizes you'll find. So for this, joining it into the round is very similar. You also want to make sure there's no twists. Make sure you turn this so they're all same size. Make sure there's no twist before joining it into the round. Now for knitting in the round, it's not as easy to keep track of where you started as it is for the double point needles. The double point needles you could just clip on, like down here, count it as the beginning of the round. As you're working with circular needles, there's not really a point. You're not working through different straight needles, so it's not very clear where the beginning is. So for this, I would recommend, there are round, they're called round markers, where you just slip them onto your needle and you just knit. You almost treat it like an extra stitch that you just slip in there. Makes it very easy to find where you started the round. Other thing you could use if your needles are small enough is safety pins, and paper clips would be amazing for this if you don't want to buy a pack of stitch markers. For this, I'll just use this as a demonstration. So you start off here, and to join it in the round, you want to make sure the stitches come all the way up the needle. That way it'll be easy to knit in the round. And you just make that first stitch. Oh, the stitches are a little sticky. And you just knit like that. And you join it in the round like that. And then you just keep knitting. You're gonna have to keep teasing it around, pushing it back up the needle. It gets easier as you keep going, but that first row is always gonna be a little sticky, a little funky, a little hard to work. Then once you make it all around, once you make it back to the stitch marker, you just slip that from one needle to the other, and then you keep going as if it wasn't there. And that's how you knit in the round. Very simple. To get the same effect of patterns, it is a little more difficult. Like garter stitch, you are gonna have to work purl the whole way around. For stockinette stitch, super duper easy. All you do is knit. But some of the others do get a little funky. You have to play around with it a little bit, which I'll cover how to do different stitches in the future when we're doing circular knitting. But for now, this is the basics. Stockinette is easiest for this, just like garter stitch is the easiest for straight needles. Stockinette stitch is the easiest for working in the round, which is fantastic because most things are made in stockinette stitch. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope this video helped you and taught you how to knit in the round. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye!